If you're a fundraiser watching your donor base shrink while your workload doubles, this is not bad luck. It's a systems problem. If you do not know me, my name's Gretchen Villegas. I've raised more than $75 million for global development initiatives. I've managed over $320 million in programs across more than 30 countries. But what surprises people most is how I started. I began my career living in a 600-person village along the Amazon. There were no roads, no electricity, and no running water. That's where I learned that real development is not about having the right answers. It's about being the bridge to resources communities actually need. Your fundraising is not failing because donors stop caring. It's failing because you're running a relationship model in a systems world. And without the right infrastructure, you'll keep losing ground no matter how many meetings you take. Here's the big problem. Fundraisers are working harder than ever and seeing the worst results, not because they're bad at relationships, but because they're missing the systems that turn effort into sustainable revenue. Let me show you what that looks like in real life. I once watched a nonprofit struggle deeply with donor retention, even though the team was working nonstop. Everyone was busy. Everyone was talking to donors, but multiple staff members were unknowingly approaching the same donors at the very same time. There was no shared visibility, no clear ownership, no system holding the relationships together internally. And the root issue was an outdated CRM. That confusion undermined donor confidence. It made the organization appear just disorganized and less serious. The donors quietly stepped back, not because they didn't care, but because the organization did not feel trustworthy to them. This is what happens when systems are missing. And yet, when I talk to fundraisers about fixing this, I hear the same answers over and over. We don't have time. We don't have capacity. We're too busy fundraising to build systems. That's the excuse that keeps you stuck, because the absence of systems is what creates constant urgency. It creates duplication, it creates firefighting, it creates exhaustion. So without systems, effort and relationships both get mismanaged. Knowledge lives in people's heads. Every campaign feels like starting from scratch and time disappears. If I look at a nonprofit's data and want to know immediately if they're in trouble, there's one number I look at first. It's the donor retention rate. Retention tells you whether trust is actually being built. Low retention means donors don't feel connected to your organization or your cause. And most organizations avoid this number because it's just plain uncomfortable. It exposes systemic issues in communication and stewardship. So instead, retention gets blamed on the economy, on donor fatigue, or on competition. But in most cases, donors do not stop giving because they couldn't afford it. They stop because the relationship went quiet or became unclear. That brings me to something that makes many traditional fundraisers uncomfortable. Hey, this is Gretchen. If you liked what you heard today and you would like to learn more about building resilient financial organizations, you can find more value in the description below by clicking on the Nexus Impact Spotlight. There's lots of information that you can use and actually apply yourself today. My most controversial belief about donor relationships is this: true transparency builds stronger long-term relationships. Admitting challenges feels risky, but honestly, deepens trust. When donors understand what's not working, they step in as partners. A long-term relationship is a partnership. A short-term relationship is a one-time gap fill. I learned how expensive hope is when I worked in an organization with no global data system. We had no reliable way to see what was happening across the programs. So we relied on anecdotes. We spent countless hours chasing information from field teams just to report back to donors. It was exhausting. It was unsustainable, and it made real relationship building nearly impossible. Relationship building without systems is not warm or human. It's expensive hope. Most fundraisers misunderstand why donors actually stop giving. They assume another organization captured their attention. In reality, donors usually disengage because the relationship goes silent, or because they're unsure what happened next. They do not know how their money was spent. They do not know what changed because of their donation. And no one comes back to ask how they want to stay involved. That's a systems failure. Now, let me walk you through the 5 systems most fundraisers are missing and why each one matters more than you think. System 1 is the donor pipeline. This is the system that moves people from awareness to advocacy. Most nonprofits treat every donor like they're ready to give, but donors move through stages. First, they become aware of you. Then, they engage with your content. After that, they make a first gift, then maybe a second gift. Then they upgrade or go on to recurring donations. Eventually, they become advocates who introduce you to others. When you skip stages, conversion collapses. To build this fast, define 3 entry points: 1 signature story, 1 proof of impact asset, 1 low friction starter offer. Then define 1 conversion for each stage. Awareness to engagement might be an email sign up. Engagement to first gift might be a $25 ask tied to a clear outcome. And assign ownership. Someone must be responsible for moving people forward. System 2 is moves management. This is the system that turns relationship building into outcomes. Most fundraisers say they're building relationships, but they cannot name the next action. That's not a relationship, that's hope. Moves management is a repeatable cadence of actions tied to donor signals. You can build 1 in a week. On day 1, segment your top 50 to 150 donors into A, B, and C tiers. Base this on capacity engagement. On day 2, define a 6-touch sequence for each tier. Mix, value, invitation, and ask. On day 3, write these core scripts: 1 for opening, 1 for follow-up, and 1 for closing. On day 4, build a simple tracker in your CRM or even a spreadsheet. Track your last touch, your next touch date, next action, offer or ask, and all your notes. On day 5, schedule the first 2 weeks of outreach. And on days 6 and 7, execute, log, and review what's been working. Moves management is not robotic. It is respectful. It prevents improvisation from wasting trust. System 3 is the communication calendar. This is what keeps donors engaged year-round. Most nonprofits only show up when they need money. That trains donors to avoid them. A communication calendar creates a narrative arc. It rotates 4 message types: proof, process, people, and participation. Proof shows credible outcomes. Process shows how the work actually happens. People show transformation. And participation shows how donors can help beyond writing a check. Fundraising works because inside a rhythm of trust. Your calendar should include 2 major campaigns per year, 2 to 4 smaller campaigns tied to programs or matching gifts. And monthly stewardship touches that show impact and gratitude. Segmentation matters. 1 list and 1 message quietly kills results. System 4 is your data system. This is the system that turns opinions into strategy. If you do not track the right numbers, you will default to acquisition. And acquisition is the most expensive lever you have. Track overall retention, new donor retention, repeat donor retention, second gift rate, time to second gift, upgrade rate, recurring conversion, lifetime value by source, revenue concentration. If I could only take a system for struggling nonprofit, if I could only create one, it would be a reliable donor database that gives you the fastest turnaround. And internally, it doesn't duplicate work. It doesn't chase unrealistic outcomes. When data is reliable, retention almost always improves and asks become clearer and easier. System 5 is stewardship. This is the system that turns one-time donors into lifetime partners. Most donors churn because nothing changes after the gift. They give, they get a receipt, then silence. Stewardship is a design experience. Immediately send a receipt with specific gratitude tied to a tangible outcome. Within 48 hours, send a human thank you. At 7 days, show proof of action. At 30 days, share an impact story. At 60 to 90 days, make a tailored offer. At 120 days, make your next ask as a continuation of the story. Stewardship is not extra work. It's the work that makes everything else work. Underneath all 5 systems is one foundation, your strategic plan. Your strategy defines what you're trying to accomplish year over year. Your revenue plan aligns directly to that strategy. You calculate what it costs. You report on what changes because of it. Fundraising today looks less like networking and more like revenue operations. Donors behave like capital allocators, not social contacts. If you cannot clearly explain the plan, the model, the proof, and the next milestone, relationship building becomes small talk, followed by an ask. And that gets ignored. So remember this. If you do not define stages, you confuse strategies with supporters. If you cannot name the next action, you do not have a relationship. If you only show up to ask, you train donors to avoid you. And if you do not track second gifts, you stay addicted to your first gifts. And if nothing changes after the gift, donors assume nothing changed because of it. Which of these 5 systems is missing in your fundraising right now? Watch the next video to see how to build a revenue plan that actually aligns with your mission.